Hey everyone, welcome to episode 89 of the Ceres podcast. I'm your host Stelios, and I'm also the founder and director of the World of Ceres. In this episode, I talk to two pillars of the Scottish fishing industry, Graeme Tallis, owner of GT Seafoods, and Alan Addison, the skipper of Venture 3. There isn't much that these pair don't know about fishing. It was good to chat to them both about all aspects of fishing that, well, pretty much weren't well known to me. One thing I wasn't overly prepared for was how much detail these guys go into when it comes to fishing and fish and sea. I think I'd like to have them both on again in the future to delve a bit deeper. I think I also need to brush up a little bit more on my knowledge, but I'm on this journey with you guys too. We have many more fish-related episodes coming up over the coming months, but we will try space them out so it doesn't become a bit too much. I know that these guys are both biased, and that's allowed because they should be proud about what they do, but I do get the overwhelming sense that they wished everyone would support British seafood a little bit more, not just Scottish, although they'd be happy with that too. And in my view, it doesn't mean ditching what you currently do. You can look at offering specials and additions to entice your customers with more variety. There is such a huge national spirit at the moment, so you'd be crazy not to boost sales with some sustainably caught British seafood. Then why not? It's just crazy not to. A few Ceres updates. We caught up with Michael Pilley. Michael has been involved with the fish and chip industry for over 60 years. He hasn't even retired yet. We wanted to chat with him and write about some of the great stories that I've heard so many times before. All being well, we will also get Mike on the podcast soon. Have a few minutes, just go through some of our articles. There's loads of great articles for you to go through. Me and my writers, we really spend a lot of time there. So, we usually answer most questions that need answering. And if we don't, let us know and we'll get it sorted for you. In this month's email, and this is why it's worth being on the mailing list, you get a discount code for 20% off Ceres potato preparation. You might as well get online, get on our online store, bag yourself a bargain, and this code ends at the end of the month. And then we will send another email with a bit of news and another discount code for next month. Anyway, enough from me. I hope you enjoy episode 89 with Graeme and Alan. Graeme, Alan, welcome to the Ceres podcast.
Cheers.
Hi there.
So, do you guys know each other quite well?
We know of each other for sure. Alan's probably a wee bit younger than me. Alan, I'm 56. You're probably just a bit younger.
51, yeah.
51, aye. So, knowing Alan through the fishing and on the boats, obviously, and Alan probably knows me. Well, Alan's White Hills and I'm Bucky, so we're kind of in the northeast. So,
well, I was Bucky as well. Bucky school. I was kind of.
Oh, was you Bucky school as well, Alan?
Yes, I was Bucky. Yeah, I was Colin and Bucky.
Oh, good. Okay.
So local.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So it's amazing because you'd almost think that everyone knows each other in the industry, but I guess you all know of each other more than anything.
Yep.
Unless you've had dealings with somebody, like a work environment, kind of level, I suppose. Like Graeme said, I know of him, and he knows of me. We'll have met and whatever. So
fantastic. So, Graeme, if we start with you, could you tell us a little bit about GT Seafoods, how it started, and what your day-to-day is like?
Well, basically, I was born and bred in Bucky, which is a fishing town. So at 16 years old, I went to work for a well-known family in the fishing industry, the Cox family at that time. So I started there when I was 16, and I was there for 20 years, but learned a heck of a lot in the job as a young 16-year-old up until 36 years old. So Bucky Fish Market at that time was booming. Used to go and buy fish in White Hills, Macduff, night time up at Kinlochbervie, Lochimber. So I was always on the go at that time, learning a job from factory floor up to management, really. After 20 years, it was the business closed. A company bought it over, a salmon company. It was made redundant after that. So on I went to, I was supplying one guy from Buckie in Grimsby, and within 2 days of being redundant, I was on my way to London to meet him. Big seafood company at that time, M&J Seafoods. So I started there. I left on Friday, started on Monday. So I went to Grimsby and Fleetwood, met a lot of people down there, buying again down there in Grimsby, around the ports there. So I met a lot of people, and then in 2003 came back up to Peterhead and started my own business, GT Seafoods. And a lot of fish about at that time, so it was easier than what it is now, of course. But ever since 2003, just like Alan and his business with the boats, you just got to work hard at it. You've got to put everything into it to make it successful, and that's basically what I've done. So that's where I'm at now. So built it up from nothing up to last year, £7.5 million turnover. So
wow,
we're doing okay. So.
And do you deal with all species, or do you have specific species that you deal with and the specific processing that you do?
Well, we do processing and we supply whole fish both to UK and to the continent, but we do all species. I learned very quickly to be flexible in this job. I think it's difficult for the guys that just does one species or two species, but we opened it up and we do all species right through from the traditional cod, haddock, whitefish to the deep water species of blue ling, scabbers, redfish. We do all sorts, and we're quite flexible in what we do. So we've got a big customer base in the continent, so we're quite flexible in what we do, both UK and continent.
So do you find that some of the less known fish need more selling, or do people that buy it know exactly what they want before, so they'll ring you and say, I want this blue ling, for argument's sake?
Well, as it is, the UK are predominantly, depending on the area you're from in the UK, like so in England is kind of cod and whiting and so forth. Up here in the northeast, where Scotland, we're kind of haddock, more orientated in haddock, lemon sole. But to be quite honest, the Scottish fish are so good and well known. It's probably the best. Alan will tell you, the richest fishing grounds for fish here, the best quality fish. People actually ask for the Scottish fish. When it comes to the deeper water species, we just don't eat them so much here in the UK. It's just how we've been brought up, I suppose, with the blue ling, this black scabbard, the forkbeard. Maybe small quantity, but it all goes to the continent, and they do a bit of haddock and cod there as well, but it's predominantly the deeper water fish that they like over there. So it's different eating habits and just how they've grown up over the years,
And Alan, how about yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do, your day to day, the history, how you got here, and so on.
Well, like Graeme, I was in Buckie School as well. Left when I was 16. My father had a fishing boat called the Reliant, and I joined him as a crewman, apprentice crewman, in 1986 when I left the school. That was just kind of the normal for that generation, that time. That was just you either left school and went to fishing, or you went to some of the boat building yards and learned a trade, engineering or carpentry or something like that. So I was with my father from 1986 to 2001, and 1991. In 1990, there was an 8-day tie-up scheme, which was to try and preserve stocks. So every boat had to stock for 8 days per month. And my father was at an age that he felt that he'd been fishing from when there was no restrictions. He just went out and caught the fish. Till this was another tier of restrictions that he felt that was he thought the job was kind of finished. This was in 1990, and so in 1991 he sold his boat and changed his career path. So at that point, that was me. I had no job. So I then went and did back to college. By this point, I'd done a deck officer, a ticket, so you're able to take a boat fishing. So in 1981, I went back to college for 6 months and did my class 1, which would allow me to take any size of fishing boat anywhere in the world, which I thought would kind of open up more opportunity. So that was, and then in 1992, I spent a year beam trawling out of Holland on the beam trawlers, working at Stellendam and Rotterdam and Urk. And then at the end of 1992, there was a local skipper, a guy, Peter Smith. He had stopped he came ashore at the same time as my father, just because of the same reasons, because of the restrictions and tie-ups and quotas and whatever. But he felt it was time to go back into the industry. So he bought a boat called an Ambassador, and he was one of the kind of, he was at the forefront in opening up deep water fisheries, and he was a real pioneer kind of guy, clever guy, really switched over with nets and things like that. So I got a job with him as a kind of relief skipper. So when he was on shore, I would take the boat. And like Graeme with the Coxes, I was 8 years with Peter Smith, and I just learned from the bottom to the top, just learned a whole lot: gear, nets, quality of fish, how to catch fish, areas. I'll forever be my debt to Peter Smith for learning the mythology of catching fish. And it was after 8 years, everything's got a natural kind of lifespan. Fishing was getting harder. He had a boat, by this time we'd moved on to a big boat called the Victory, which was 30 metres, 33 metres. And the quotas were getting tighter. And the guys I'm with now, Mark Lovey, he was building a boat called the Venture. He was a younger guy, and I just felt that his outlook towards the fishing was more progressive than where I was at. So anyway, so it's 20 years. I left for the Victory, went aboard the Venture, and we're now on a new boat. Well, the boat's 4 years old now. So, but I've been with this family, Mark Lovey and his brother, for 20 years now. So, skippering like trip on, trip off. So it's anywhere from off the coast of Ireland out to Rockall, up to Fairybank, up off the Norwegian coast, just nomadic. We're just going to follow the fish where they are. So kind of my 35 years in a nutshell.
So does a vessel like yours, do people like yourself go out for a certain species, or again, is it you just catch what there is and then sell it to whoever wants it?
It's all quota dependent. It depends how much quota for each species each owner or each boat company has. There is specific times a year. I mean, mainly our target species is monkfish. We're always looking for monkfish because it's a high value fish, and we need that kind of in our catch. What's what I'm looking for? Catch framework. We need monkfish to be there to generate the income. But likes at this time of year, usually from January. This year's been totally different. Brexit and whatever, and the quotas haven't been set yet. So this year's just like a total anomaly, which would normally would be from January through till maybe May. We'd be fishing the deep water to the west of the Hebrides for, well, mainly monkfish, but we'll be fishing for blue line, black scabbard, your deep water stocks. That's what we'd be fishing for 3 or 4 months of the year. And then after that, we'd move on to just your normal demersal stocks like your cod and haddock. Maybe out to Rockall for some cod, for haddock, up to Faroe for some cod, or just your normal kind of routine kind of fish that the UK enjoy and they demand, I suppose. But there's always that kind of odd trip that if the weather's too bad to go deep, when we go out and look for haddocks and things like that. As I said, it's quota dependent what you're mainly catching, but also seasonality. When fish is in season, it's better to catch them in season. Like so just now, haddocks are not in season. Haddocks are thin, so to try and get a good return for a haddock just now is very difficult.
So for you guys, what's been a bigger issue, or has it been the same, or just has it been compacted that have both come at the same time? Which has sort of been worse, COVID or Brexit?
Well, for me, it's been a bit of everything, to be honest. COVID was bad enough with the lockdowns, etc. Especially the UK lockdowns. We do a lot into Cornwall, London, but that business is gone at the minute. So, although it's gone at the minute, as Alan rightly says, the quotas have not been set. But by goodness, the boats are finding it hard to get that quota to land the fish that is required anyway. So it's kind of very difficult circumstances on shore at the minute, as I'm sure it is off with the Alan boats as well. Brexit came about. Okay, it was no deal. I think it was just the last week of the holidays, so we had been preparing a wee bit to get the fish across to the continent, but everything came at one time, and we had to try and adapt and get everything done within the first week of coming back in January. And it just so happened this year in January the weather was good and there was a mountain of fish to come back to. So all hell broke loose, really, the export, and there was maybe 30, 40 trucks, and new systems had to be adopted right away on the 4th of January. So inevitable there was going to be problems putting the fish across. So it was taking maybe 3 days to get the fish across to the continent, whereas it normally takes next day. But it was sheer through paperwork, computer systems, and it was always going to take 3-4 weeks to bed down, but for the system to bed in. But through commodity codes, through labeling of the boxes, through loads of different things, there was big problems to get the fish across to the continent through the civet, the vets, and then through the customs. But the main problem that came about was that if all the exporters were putting all their fish into one truck, maybe 2 of them, 4 of them, or 6 of them, and one was getting something wrong, whether it been a 9 as a 6 or a 6 as a 9 or whatever in the paperwork, that truck was put to one side and it was delayed. So there was massive problems in getting the fish across. But even more so for the shellfish and the lobsters and the live fish, all that kind of stuff. I could imagine the upheaval they went through to get the fish across. So it really has been a real trying period. It's probably cost a lot of companies a lot of money. More so, again, the shellfish guys, but we found it bad enough. But it sorted out in week 4, week 5. It got better, so it's back to next day. But still need to be very careful. But the other thing is, to the industry, I reckon it will cost us about £50,000 a year more just on paperwork alone to send fish to the continent for this 12 months.
Yeah.
So difficult times ahead.
I was thinking to myself, if it's paperwork, is there not some sort of software that could be implemented to sort of fill the gap so it sort of becomes a bit more automated, or is that just a bit of a pipe dream at the moment?
No, that is Stelios. That is in place. Of course, the software, everything's in place, but you have to, you've got about 6 sheets of paper for every consignment.
Wow.
So, if you're sending to 12 customers, some are sending to 15 customers, so you'd have 15 sets of paperwork to do, 15 health certificates to buy. So they're about £75 per time. So massive costs on. But so what we did, was we started a company in Boulogne. We set up a company in Boulogne with good help from one of our French customers. So we set up a company, GT France, in Boulogne. So what we did then was we only need one set of documents for everything. So it's one consignment, all going to ourselves in Boulogne, and then we're delivering them after they're cleared in Boulogne. So that's going to save us in the long term a lot of money. So that's what we did to get by that, to get over that hurdle,
So you have to do all of this to send product to Europe, let's say. Do European fish suppliers have to do the same to bring it back to the UK? So would an Icelandic, Norwegian, Russian, I guess, would these have to do it also?
I believe I think it's now 12 months grace, if I'm correct, Alan, they've got up to for importing. You can import free of charge at the moment, goods coming from the continent. So it's not a level playing field. But I think they've got to pay for the fish, I believe, from Iceland to Norway into Grimsby, I believe.
Oh, I see.
But goods imported into the UK, I think it's there's a free period of, I think it's 12 months now, I believe.
So one question for you both, and I don't know who's best to sort of go with it first, but has the whole sort of promise or pre-negotiation with Brexit, has the reality differed from the expectation? And is it all in phases? Should we expect more changes after the 5-year transition period?
Alan's best to go on this one, I think. Coming from a catching sector point of view, it's not so bad for us here a wee bit, but I think it's a disaster for them. But over to you, Alan.
Yeah, okay. I think definitely. I mean, expectations had to be managed. From a personal point of view, I had no doubt in my mind that the European boats are still going to be allowed access into UK waters and after Brexit. I mean, there was guys that thought that when January the 1st, all the European boats be thrown out of UK waters and it'd be like a nirvana for the UK fleet. That was never going to happen. There was always going to be a negotiation of some description to allow the EU fleet into the UK waters to fish their quota. What actually happened was just was beyond comprehension, to be honest with you. And the government has sold the deal. It's like a great deal with this £150 million worth of fish, or whatever the figure is. The catching sector will be better off.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just pie in the sky. I mean, it's fish that nobody will ever catch. It's like tons of dabs and gurnards and things. Obviously, there's a value to them, but there's been no value to the Scottish catching fleet because we do not catch them. They're not a species that we can kind of market. And at the end of the 5-year period, nothing will change. There'll be no desire to go back to Brexit and start negotiating a new deal. There'll be a new government in charge in the UK. My mind is that's it. We'll be left with this legacy for years to come till you get a government with a desire to change the. I don't even want to make it call it a deal because it wasn't a deal. I mean, our negotiators should hang their head in shame how they've just given away the UK's asset for very little return or no zero return. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the Europeans must be just laughing at us just now. I mean, and they're making our lives really difficult with this. Normally, the quotas are all set at the end of December. So on the 1st of January, each individual operator will know through their PO what fish they have to catch and what swaps they can swap to get. If you've got a species on your license that you can't, you don't, you're not able to catch it, you can swap that for somebody for something else. But all that's been put on hold just now until the total allowable catches has been agreed, and they're still in talks now. There's no swaps being allowed, and it's just almost like stagnated the fleet. Everybody's just treading water just now. As Graeme said, I mean, there was 800 boxes in Peterhead today, or something like that. I mean, that's just absolutely nothing. That's just one boat's. In reality, that's just one boat's catch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was from I'm not sure how many boats landed today. It was maybe 6 or 8 boats. It was just very little. Mm-hmm. So every boat, if you look at the market landings, every boat's just landing dribs and drobs of fish, not a lot of fish, which would normally be landing. And that's just purely because guys are just totally restricted to what they have in their license to catch. They can't lease any fish in, they can't swap any. So it's really just shackled the UK fleet we're coming almost into April. I mean, we're almost a quarter of a year, and the boats are really struggling just now.
Wow.
The one thing I can't understand, Alan, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, in Denmark just now, the Urinar boats, the Bresse Bank and Andre Leduc and Farnella, I believe they're fishing west of Shetland or up that way or wherever, coming into the waters, catching 50, 60 ton of coley per boat and taking them back to Denmark for sale.
I quite believe it. Yeah, I quite believe
It's incredible what's happening.
Yeah,
incredible.
And the Danish fleet, like multi-riggers for they tow more than 2 nets, 3 or 4 nets. They're all fishing around the east side of Shetland because they can't get into Norway. Norway hasn't agreed with the EU access into Norwegian waters, so they've all come into the UK waters. So we've now got there's a condensing effect of effort round about the Shetlands, and there's only so much fishing effort a certain area can withstand before you start to overfish the area, and the area starts to suffer. And that's what's happening. You've got the boats are being pushed into a zone, and everybody's fighting for space. It's almost like a land grab at sea. That's what it's like.
Incredible. Yeah.
Wow. So the whole point was that one of the main topics for the whole Brexit and fishing was that we'd have our waters back, and yet we started talking about Danish boats coming into Scottish waters and just sort of taking what they want.
Yeah, that's why we're so hungry.
Well, you can see why, and you genuinely think that there'd be no change now, that they've kicked the road down, the can down the road, and that's it.
Ideally, in an ideal world, I hope that's not the case. And I hope in 5 years' time, the government, whichever government's in charge, has got the heart to try to think how better swear just now. got the heart to and the desire to fight a bit harder for fishermen.
Yeah.
Wow, very interesting. So, in your mind, like, what would be the perfect arrangement for you guys domestically initially? Like, if we could focus on just sort of sales within the UK and catching, what would be the best arrangement for you guys?
Well, from a catching point of view, ideally, if the UK fleet could get access to more quota, that's at the end of the day, that's the crux of the argument is. I mean, you've got UK held 80% of the waters within the EU, yet we've only got 20% of the quota or access. But that's like me going across to France and getting the Frenchman to grow his grapes for his wine, me going across and taking his grapes back to Scotland and making my own wine, or going to Italy and getting my Parma ham and taking it back to Scotland. That's basically what they're doing. They're coming into the UK waters, taking their fish and taking it back to the continent. There's no benefit to the UK economy. So, from my point of view, is give the UK boats a fairer share of the quota, not all the quota, just a fairer share of the quota to catch in their own waters, and that would stabilise the markets. You'd be able to, as Graeme knows, it's been the market prices this year has just been a roller coaster. If you graph it on a daily basis, some days you'll get heavy landing, and because the demand's so weak, the prices crash. Within 3 or 4 days, there's no fish being landed, spike again. It's just been a roller coaster of prices this year, just a total gamble. Now, if we could level out that landing, so if the boats had a better idea what they were allowed to catch and the amount to catch, it would help everybody. It would help the shore sector because they'd be able to plan their markets and plan how their supply chains, and it would help the boats because we know what we could catch. So to me, that would be the ideal thing, to try and stop this boom or bust prices at a fair price for everybody. I mean, the processors need the fishermen need the processors. We all need to make a living.
And to knock on from Alan's point there is that we're starved of fish. I think there's probably 3 companies, maybe 4, have stopped since January. That's pretty poor because lack of fish. I think things are very lucky just now because there's furlough to fall back on for a lot of companies. But once furlough finishes, I think there'll be a heck of a mess. But more consistency of fish is required because you're trying to plan your daily factory, your production, and without that daily fish, you're busy one day, Monday very busy, Tuesday half day, Wednesday day off, Thursday day off, Friday busy. That can't continue on shore. We need a better supply of fish. This is why we're all just clinging on. waiting for this quotas, hopefully it gets sorted out, waiting for the swaps, waiting for this Norwegian sector to open. There's loads of things we're waiting on. But Alan's right, everybody's treading water just now, and it's very difficult.
Surely you want this quota issue to be sorted before hospitality turns the crank and reopens again.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Definitely.
Because that could obviously just, I guess that would send prices massively upwards, wouldn't it, for certain species?
Yeah. I mean, when hospitality opens again, I think it's the 14th of April or something like that. The big company we supply in Cornwall was telling me they're looking to take their staff back and get going then. But the other thing they're thinking is, because there's no holidays abroad this year, they don't think it could be very busy in the UK for holidays. So they're hoping to get a kind of boom, claw back some loss of money on that if they can. But without the fish, it's going to be very difficult. Very difficult.
It sounds like there's a lot of internal challenges there, really.
Loads.
And again, like, is there a fisheries minister that you can talk to and scream to and shout to that is in Westminster? Is then is that a hurt? No, there isn't. Or hurt? Yes, there is, but they're useless.
Well, there is a fisheries minister, but what she does, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So, in an ideal world, then, you know, you want to sell fish everywhere, not just domestically. What do you sort of see as the best option being for selling fish to abroad?
Well, until like for us, until Italy and France and Spain start opening up, it's the continental market's going to be very, very tricky, very difficult, because I mean, Italy is, well, Graeme will know, Italy is a main place for monks.
Yeah.
Well, in France for deep water fish, for like blue line, black scabbers, that. So until the continent, I mean, you hear them speaking now about a third wave coming in and locking down again. Well, that's the last thing you want to hear of for our side of things. You want to see things open up until even travel starts, and because I mean they're so. It's okay. Your domestic market is definitely going to get a boom this year because of the prohibitions on travel and holidays and things like that. But you need the travel to open up so that your tourists are going to all your tourist restaurants in your Italy's and your Spain's and your France's and things like Portugal's and things. So just to generate that demand again.
Yeah. The only thing is people need to eat, and the supermarkets are open in the continent, so they're always looking for fish. But problem is with the hospitality still being closed down, lockdown. There's only so much fish you can send over there, a certain species, and then it crashes, and then it's not worth anyone doing anything. You know, very difficult times.
It sounds like it sounds like you're both a bit sort of a bit despondent almost, that you feel a bit, you know, it's, you can hear it in your voices that you feel a bit like there's so much going on that you're almost just sort of waiting to see what happens next almost.
I think the whole industry is waiting to see what happens, but I think we're probably doom and gloom at the minute. But I do believe there will be a good future in this business once everything opens up and things are sorted out, and that's for them. It can withstand the loss of money, the this and that. You know, it's going to be very difficult to get through this period, because Alan's right. If there isn't a third wave, jeepers creepers, I don't know where we go from here. You know.
You've both roughly been in the industry for 30 years or so. Have you ever sort of seen anything at this scale before?
I've not.
No. I've seen like the collection sector's had its problems, and I dare say the Graeme side, the processors have their problems as well. But nothing on the scale. It's just like a perfect storm. One of either Brexit or COVID would have been a hard enough nut to crack. But the two of them together has just been perfect storm. Yeah, and the lack of strength of the ordeal coming out of Brexit was really like a kick in the stomach. Really, it was just. I mean, we were promised a sea opportunity. Well, that's the last thing. We haven't got a sea opportunity at all just now, as far as I see.
I suppose in some ways, the COVID thing, sort of chicken and egg, but in some ways the COVID issue could be helping the fact that there isn't much fish anyway, and the whole Brexit malarkey, and then it just could tide you over. But it could either be really great timing or really bad timing. There doesn't seem to be any grey area there, does there?
Well, you're probably right. I mean, if the boats had quota of fish just now, it would be an oversupply, and the prices could be possibly even worse.
Yeah,
possibly. It's that's entirely correct with yourself.
Yeah, no, definitely, and for again, one of the things that I think a lot of people seemed very upset about was the common fisheries policy. Has that changed at all? Like, does that change at all for people that, don't know about it? You guys would know about that. So
the common fisheries policy, to me, as it stands just now, the UK have just adopted everything that the common fisheries policy stood for until the UK government start to tweak it themselves. The common fisheries policy, it's hated by fishermen, but to be devil's advocate, the common fisheries policy did work because the stocks did come back. Because in the late 90s, early 2000s, the stocks, or late 80s into the 80s, the stocks were totally overfished. There was a huge fleet of boats, UK boats, Scottish boats, fishing in the same area, and just really almost decimated the area. Something had to be done. And if whatever they did, it wasn't going to be, it was going to hurt, because guys were going to lose their businesses, guys were going to lose their livelihoods. But they were going to lose their livelihoods anyway, because there was no fish to catch. There was too many boats. They built too many boats in it. And the demersal stock, if you look at the curve of the demersal stock, at that point, the demersal stock was decreasing. So you had an increase in fleet and a decrease in stock, which was always going to end badly for everyone. They speak about the Gardoid explosion in the 1970s, and that's when, like, you had your cod, your white, and your haddock, your hake. There was, for whatever reason, the nutrients were correct in the sea, and like all that stocks just exploded, and there was an entire fleet built on the back of this one kind of explosion of stock. But that stock kind of ran out in the 80s and 90s, yet it's still this big fleet. So the common fisheries policy did what it was intended to do, but it was very painful for everybody involved. And I think that it was unfair to just blame the Scottish or the UK fishermen, because we were decommissioning boats and breaking up boats, and the Europeans were still building boats, new boats, to come and fish in the Scottish waters. That's the part that Scottish fishermen hate again about the common fisheries policy. It was so unfair. They were scrapping our boats, yet they were building new boats at the same time. Now, in the last 10, maybe 15 years, I believe we've went through like a Gardoid explosion again, because the stocks in the last 10 to 12 years has just been gone off a scale, the stocks, up until maybe 2 years ago. And then I think I've seen a leveling out of the stocks. It's maybe a slight decrease back to kind of normal levels. Fish are getting slightly harder to catch, and a lot of it's to do, I would say, it's just a normal, it's just a phenomenon. It's nothing to do with overfishing. It's nothing to do with boats landing too much. It's just a natural cycle that Mother Nature goes through, and that's it. You've just got to. I mean, I've been, as I say, it's 30 odd years I've seen it as at least the third time I've seen it. The stocks have kind of started, fish are being harder to catch. So the common fisheries policy, getting back to your original question, whereas majority of fishermen hate it, but I feel that it did what it was supposed to do, but it was unfair the way it was done, because the UK fleet were victimised against the EU fleet. Our ships were scrapped to let the Europeans in to get their share, which I think was wrong.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that.
It's because I've only ever heard like the other side, which is, they're allowed to come here and we aren't. And I think that's just a lot. It's a deeper perspective there, isn't it, really? But you can also see why, the UK fishing fleet was annoyed with that. It makes complete sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think it does kind of resonate with even, like, I think it's because we're an island nation, even your non fishing based or anybody with any fishing knowledge. It just seems to be that the fishing in this kind of taking back control of our own waters just seems to resonate with a lot of people during elections and things like that. It's a strong selling point, and it's used as a bargaining tool by many political parties.
Yeah. So, one question I sort of touched on with Jimmy Buchan last week, but it wasn't really his forte, really. But one thing, maybe I didn't mention it. I'm not sure now, but I don't think it was his forte anyway. So maybe maybe he couldn't answer it, and maybe I didn't ask him because I forgot. But a few years ago, Frozen at Sea, the sort of Norwegian, the Icelandics, all of these other European boats, let's say, they sort of invested into Frozen at Sea. What sort of stopped the Scottish fishermen doing the same? And why didn't they embrace the technology of freezing fish at sea? What was the difference that I don't understand? Was it money, or did they not like the technology, or was it just something that I'm just not aware of?
Well, Graeme could. I'll say in my mind, it was two things. One was the locality of the fish, and two was the management of the vessels. The locality of the fish are on our doorstep, so we don't need to freeze them. We can land them fresh. So your Icelandics and your Faroese and Norwegians, they're usually covering big distances. So they're going a long way to catch their fish, so it takes them a long way to come back. So to freeze at sea makes sense. The other thing is the vessel ownership. Like your Faroese, Icelandics, Norwegians, majority of that big frozen sea ships are company owned, whereas in the UK, the majority of inshore fleet are like family based or part family owned. So to me, that's the two differences why Frozen at Sea was never embraced by the Scottish or UK fleets, mainly because we can go 20, 30 miles off the coast and catch our fish, whereas maybe Norwegians go 300 miles off the coast. So there's no need for us to freeze it. For the domestic market, it's better to land it fresh than frozen.
And I think, Stelios, there wouldn't be so much people working in the fishing industry if some of the big Scottish ships did adopt their boats to do that. But the grounds here, fresh fish, you cannot beat the Scottish fish. Yeah, people from France are phoning daily looking for Scottish fish. Germans are phoning looking for Scottish fish. So I think Alan's absolutely right. We've based it all of our life on fresh produce in 4 days, 5 days, 8 days, or whatever, and it's on your doorstep. Best quality fish.
Why is it you think? So if we split the sort of consumer base into two, we'll look at sort of hospitality, restaurants, fish and chip shops on one side, and then we'll look at consumers on the other side. So if we look at sort of let's start with the restaurants and the hospitality and the fish and chip shops. Why do you think more of them don't use Scottish fish? Is it? Yeah, I don't think it's a quality issue. Definitely don't think it's that. I'd put my money on it every day of the week. I don't think it's a quality issue. Do you think it's the inconsistency of the prices that was sort of mentioned earlier?
I do. Fish and chip shops will they could take a pallet or whatever of the frozen at sea fish at a price, and that's the price. Here in the UK, it's very much on the day price and on the market. So, but again, you pay for quality. I'm not saying the frozen at sea are not poor quality or anything like that. But if I went to a restaurant, I would know if it's frozen or sea or a fresh Scottish fish. But nothing wrong with the frozen at sea, of course. But I think it's basically the big fryers will go for a standard set price for 3 months or 6 months or whatever, so they know what they're doing, rather than pay, £7 a kilo one day, 9 the next, 8 the next. It's just how they work.
And I guess you can't hedge prices on wild seafood like you can on grown chicken, let's say. You just can't do those things, can you?
No, experience tells you roughly what the fish will make that day on the auction. But when you wake up in the morning, you don't only look at Peterhead, you look at Grimsby, Shetland, Handstorm, you gather all the information you possibly can. just to give you a rough idea of what there is going about. But the fresh haddock that you use mainly for fryers, chip shops, there's always a demand for that Scottish fish. There's so many businesses, chip shops around the northeast here, Aberdeen, Glasgow, Edinburgh. Crikey, they need a lot of fish.
Mm. Yeah, definitely they do.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, and I think someone said to me, we did a podcast with a chap, Derek Collinson, his name is, and he works for a very big fish company called
DR Collins.
No, it's Polar Frost, which is owned by Young's, and and he was saying that he estimated that it might have been him, but he estimated that if the demand of Scottish fish went up by 10%, that could sort of be too much, for everyone to sort of manage. Would you think that is an underestimation?
Well, 10% just now, that wouldn't be a lot. But I think it's back to the landings of what's happening here in the UK right now. Alan's mentioned about the quotas and all that. It's just a mess.
Yeah.
I
guess his statement was pre-COVID, pre-Brexit.
Pre-COVID.
Yeah. So that sort of throws everything off, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, but a 10% increase wouldn't be that much for the Scottish here to use up. To be honest, Elios,
And in your mind, both of your minds, would you like to see, if again looking at hospitality, fish and chip shops, and all of that lot, would you like to see them using more Scottish fish?
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
We've got to keep promoting Scottish fish. Scottish fish is the best, without a doubt. Scottish fish here, the boats are landed, Stelios, 4 days, 5 days. You won't get any better. Fish coming over from Norway, Iceland into Grimsby, it takes 2-3 days to travel. They're catching maybe 6-7 days. It's a no-brainer for to use and promote Scottish fish for the fish and chip shops.
I guess
there's absolutely no reason why a hotel anywhere in the UK should be using frozen fish. Yep. The locality, so the size of the UK, you're never more than, I can't remember if the figure is, I'll say 90 miles, I'm probably wrong, but you're never more than 90 miles from the coast. So for any business to be using frozen fish, in my mind, okay.
I think I can see how passionate Alan is there, to be honest, about this. And I guess because you go out there and you literally toil and work hard to lift that fish, so I can see why that sort of like annoys you a little bit, if I'm honest. I supply flour, batter products, and we use all British flour, but I don't think it's as easy. And I think one of the biggest reasons, and when I talk to a lot of fish and chip shops, I don't think that no one's ever said to me, and I've been in the industry give or take 20 years, but no one's ever said to me, I use frozen at sea because it's cheaper. And I'm sure some people's motivation is that. I'm sure it is. But I think for the most part, it's that the price stays steady. And I think for them, if a 40 count, let's say, of a 10 to 12 ounce haddock was, I don't know, I'm going to guess because I don't know what the market rate is, but if it was £80, let's say, £2 a fillet all year, I don't know, at least 6 months of the year, I think most people could probably stomach that sort of consistency. But I think when it goes, 72, 74, 78, 60, 88, 89, get to Christmas, 101, and then drops again, I think most people just think it's just too much. How do you manage as a business those margins when everything's just up and down?
Well, I think they need the quotas sorted out and get bigger, get more quotas for the vessels, so the price is more stable. The price is all over the shop just now, and it will be until all this is sorted out.
We've just went back to full cycle. What I said, when you asked me about the quote, I said the fleet needs more quotas so we can land consistency and eradicate this massive troughs. I mean, there's always going to be a supply. It's a supply and demand industry, so there's always going to be peaks and troughs. But the roller coaster it's been this year is the worst I've ever seen. I mean, you hit the right market and you're laughing. You hit the wrong market and you're in tears.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing that that those sort of that Wheel of Fortune is still a thing in the year 2021. But I guess it is just mostly because of everything that's sort of happening at the moment, and hopefully that does get itself sorted. But if we look at the consumer side for a moment, why? Again, I know you guys may not know the answer to this, but you'll have some experience behind it. Why is it that this nation focuses on the big five? Why is it cod, haddock, prawns, tuna, salmon? I guess you don't mind salmon and you don't mind haddock and you definitely don't mind cod, but prawns and tuna, they're all imported. And I guess some salmons, well, obviously to some degree, salmon and cod and haddock's imported too. But why is this just over reliance on those five big species?
If I go first in this one, I think it's a historic family, growing up in Scotland, fish on your doorstep. Predominantly boats are catching that big well, not the salmon, but 4 or 5 of that species regular. We've been spoiled over the years, to be honest. Best quality fish taken home every night. As I said earlier, different parts of the UK are different species. England is a lot of cod, a lot of whiting, some hake, but predominantly, in my opinion, it's how you've been brought up, what you've been brought up with, what's been on the shores here, and then you go to Boulogne, you go to France, and it's totally opposite. It's a deep water species of whiteling, blue ling, scabbards, and they eat very little haddock and the big five. Well, a lot of salmon, a lot of monkfish, but very little of the haddock and cod. That's just how I feel, Alan, how it is. But I'm sure you'll have your own views.
I know, I totally agree with you, Graeme. It's just it's even now, it's like a generational thing. We're lazy because, like, if I take fish, I fry home, it's usually a haddock or a bit of monk or a bit of cod. That's it. But personally, on a personal level, I've been trying to experiment a bit more. And with Jim Cowie up at his restaurant in Scrapstar there, and I took home last trip. I took home Tusk, and we did it, and I would say it was better than monk to eat.
Was that right?
Tusk, and Jim had said that, and I kind of didn't believe him. And I'd spoken to the other skipper, Colin Stephen Harvest Hope. He tried it, and he said exactly the same. And I would say Tusk, it's kind of like how a monk has got the membrane or the skin, kind of 7 skins or whatever it is. And sometimes a monk can be quite tough to eat. I've just got that wee bit of toughness to it. Tusk, it hasn't got that. Once it's skinned, it hasn't got that, but it's got that meaty flavour, like a meaty texture. So I say, like, it's not like flaky like a haddock, it's solid like a monk. And it was just really good. This week, I hadn't tried them personally, but I took him red gurnards, and one of the easiest to fillet. But normally we just £20 a box, 50 kilos, and it goes for creel bait. Jim, again, he's a big into sustainability and his seasonality, and he's a big fan of gurnard. Now, I tasted gurnard maybe, well, when I was beam trawling back in Holland, the Dutch guys liked gurnard, so that's 30 years ago. And so I took home gurnard, and my wife, she's works in the local Seafield Arms in Cullen, a local hotel. She's in the reception there, and the chefs wanted to try different species on his menu because the chef's a bit of a story. The chef's from South Africa, and he's fed up cooking haddock and cod and monk. He says, there's more fish, there's surely more choice of variation of fish to try. So he asked Arlene if I would take him some different species for him to try. So I took home red gurnard to him, and they cooked it. Now, I think they kind of pan-fried it with the skin on. I filleted it for them and took the bones out, and they were absolutely delighted with it. They were just this red gurnard. And so I promised them some Tusk as well, because I tried it. And pollock, I tried pollock last week. Pollock was lovely as well. I feel it is about, whether it's an age thing, as you get all on, you see, if you've travelled about the world a wee bit and you've seen how other countries do their fishing, and I think we're just so lazy as a nation with this cod haddock thing. It's just because there's so many different fish out there to try. even like for your megrams and squids, and it's so. I suppose it's disheartening now as a fisherman to see all that product go to the continent and maybe consumed in the UK.
I think from time to time you see James Martin on the Saturday Cook Show, and he'll maybe do a hake, or he'll do he had a dab one. He was doing a dab, and crikey, we've got phone calls for people looking for dabs. I've never seen a dab in 10 years. But it seems to be that once they go on that cooking programs like a hake or pollock, by goodness, it sells the next week.
It was the
sea bass. Sea bass is my bugbear.
Yeah.
It's sea bass. Everything's sea bass. Sustainable sea bass. There's more fish in the sea than sea bass.
I was chatting to Mitch Tonks on the podcast, who's a big proponent of sort of sustainable fish, especially down south, and he was saying that they literally throw sea bass back in the water. They catch it, and they're not. This was pre-COVID and pre-Brexit, and
it's a quota. They're really restricted with their quotas. That's right. But the French have got plenty of quota.
Yeah, he was sending letters to DEFRA and everything, and saying, "Look, it's just an abomination. We shouldn't be having to throw this fish away." But do you think maybe the British people? I guess there's some laziness there, but do you think it's also we're just not? Well, I am British, but my palate is probably very Cypriot, and that's why I like all seafood. But do you think we're just not adventurous as a nation of people? Do we like our fish like we like our chicken, with no skin and no bone and to be a breast? Is that why cod and haddock is so popular to so many people?
Probably to a certain extent, but I think people. We've got a fresh fish shop in Ellen that is a busy fish shop in Ellen. We do try different things week in, week out, but goodness, 1 week to sell, the next week is trying to get that younger people educated with different species of fish, and that's where Sea Fish and all these guys should be coming in and really pushing for laying and coal. I mean, coal is another one, Alan. The amount of coal is at times a good price. There's things I'm sure you can do in the UK with it, but we're just blinking didn't try them.
Jam,
Jam does. I saw Jam a few times.
Well, he says when you cook it out, like coal has got quite a dark colour of flesh. Yeah. When you cook it, he says it just goes white like a white fish, like a haddock.
That's what I mean.
When you cook it out.
Yeah, we used to sell coley in the shop a few years ago when I was in the shop, and it's grey to look at. It's bluey grey, and the minute you fry it, it is white. It is white, and again, I think it's got quite a nice flavour. I think,
where was that shop at, Stillers?
No, it's in the Midlands. In the Midlands, it was.
Midlands,
and we did it for about a year, 2 years, and we passed on the savings to customers as well. So, because obviously it costs less than cod, so we're trying to encourage them to eat different fish. But yeah, I think a lot of the time, customers, it depends how you sell it to them as well, doesn't it? And I think the problem is everyone has just put cod and haddock and salmon on this real high pedestal. So we almost I don't know if you guys have ever saw it. Have you ever seen this advert where there's a used car salesman and they always try to pretend that it's a Golf, and they'll say, "Oh, it's just like a Golf. It sounds just like a Golf." And I always feel like with cod and haddock, it's the same thing. Everyone's selling something. Oh, it's just like cod and haddock. Instead of celebrating how good that species is, we're always And I remember years ago when I first came into the industry, my family was all fresh fish, and I remember back then I used to hear stories about people that used to buy whiting to sell as like a haddock replacement, without people knowing. And you just think, what was wrong with just selling whiting? Why did you have to sell it as a fake haddock? And I think it does make you wonder. But I think one of the things that I mentioned to Jimmy Buchan is that one thing I can't get my head around. We've got all this fish in the UK, and supermarkets for the most part do a grand job, as in to use British fish, let's say. I guess they could do better in lots of other areas too. But one thing that I really couldn't get my head around was they had the fish pie mix, and it had salmon, cod, and it was panga. And I couldn't understand why they'd import panga from, no doubt, the cheapest bidder in Vietnam.
Cheapest fish.
Yeah, the cheapest fish. And And they're bringing it over and putting it in this fish pie packet. Now, not being funny, if they got onto the phone to someone like Graham, and said, "Look, we can change this around. What have you got that's white that we can change this with that's sustainable?" Graham, I'm sure you'd have lots of options, wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, you'd have your whiting or haddock or whatever. But I mean, supermarkets obviously going for the cheapest option there for the markup, I suppose. But that's something I wouldn't eat. That's for sure.
I'm not a big fan of. One of my ingredient suppliers, he went to Vietnam to sell. I think it might have been breadcrumb to these big factories, and he said to me they were walking through this. I guess it's a river farm type thing, where they farm the panga, and they said that they have to. You have to give the fish iron. So they said, "Oh, we'll go for a walk and we'll give the fish iron," and they literally just got in every sort of big pond, let's say, they just got a big rusty axle that was sitting on the side, and they just threw it in, and he said, like, in England, he assumes, and I guess you guys would, if you know any about this, it would have been clean iron shavings. It would have been, to some degree, or iron powder or ferrite, and yet he just picks up this dirty old axle that they'd probably got off some mangled old car somewhere, and they just throw it in, oil and all, because there was an oil spill afterwards, and then as they carried on walking, he was in disbelief, and someone goes, "Oh, I'm just going to go to the toilet." So that, how over here, if you're in a factory, let's say, and someone says, "Oh, I'm just going to go to the toilet," you sort of just, okay, then they get up, they leave the room. Well, this guy literally just walks to the other side of the area where there was like another pen, and just does his business there and walks back. And he just said to me, "Stel, never eat pangasius." And I was like, okay. But then some people have said to me, "Oh, well, it depends where you get it from." But this supplier, and it was a few years ago, and it is anecdotal, but this supplier was the supplier that was supplying M&S, so it's not like, it's not like they were supplying, I don't know, some processor in the UK. It was going to M&S,
But Banga Stelios comes across in shipments of 20 ton at a time, defrosted in their bandsaw or their whatever they do, and they're just coated in breadcrumbs and they're sold as whitefish fillets.
But again, like, there's so much availability in the UK that I don't know. I just thought, why aren't they using some form of British whitefish to do that? That there is an oversupply of, and maybe isn't very popular. Is that because it just still isn't cheap enough for them?
Yeah, I believe it'll be based on cost. Wow. For sure. I would say, because I've heard stories about that, £100 a ton, £200 a ton. It's just a cheap, poor. Well, it's probably good when they catch it, but once they defrost it and all the rest of it, not for me.
It's just a protein, isn't it? It's just a cheap protein.
Yeah.
So it's like the Americans with that tilapia. That's another form of catfish, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting.
I think the supermarkets have got a lot to answer for just the whole kind of mentality of the housewives. And it probably hasn't happened in the last year, 2 years. It's probably a generational last 10, 20, 30 years. But everything has got to be vacuum packed and packed in plastic to within an inch of its life. It's got to be a certain size. Like you hear stories Marks and Spencer's being with them. They demand a 200-gram haddock fillet and things like that. I mean, a haddock's a natural resource. It's not something that you can. It's got an exact size every time. I mean, you'll get that certain size within. So to me, the supermarkets have done a lot of damage to the wet fish industry. I mean, you go on holiday to Spain, mainland Spain. We were, of course, a couple of years ago for a couple of years of trot, and you go in. It wasn't even a big supermarket. This place was maybe the size of Bucky, Graham. The supermarket was maybe the size of Tesco's in Bucky, and the wet fish counter was just amazing. It was the length of the shop, and the folk were queuing up. The housewives were queuing up there to get their fish. And I mean, you're speaking 30 degrees heat. I mean, everything was in a beautiful bed of ice, and it just all looked super fresh. Near this things are kind of wrinkled because they're dry out or the ice is it just they look very appetizing. And you're thinking, boy, I think there's just a total different. Whether it's just their lifestyle, they seem to buy the product for that day, whereas our housewives do their again I say housewives, house persons, do their shop for their weekly shop rather than like a daily shop. Whereas like my mother, she would have probably done a daily shop back in the 60s and 70s and things, but that's kind of forgotten now in your local. So that the supermarkets I feel had a quite a hefty part to play in that side of the wet fish industry. I always think it's funny when folk come back for their holidays in Italy or Spain. Oh, yeah, a lovely bit of monkfish, a lovely bit of prawn. You're thinking it was probably Scottish. It was probably caught in the North Sea and then shipped across, and you gobbled it up in Italy or Spain, thinking it's a Spanish monk or a Spanish langoustine or whatever.
See, the supermarkets, most of them now have took their wet fish counters away.
Yeah.
Because the one in Ellen, for example, the fish they were using Norwegian or Icelandic fish for a supplier in Grimsby. They were coming there, they were getting filleted, backed into the distribution hub. Then they went somewhere else to get to be dispatched again. It was about 8 days of the shelf life of the fish before they hit the supermarket shelf. So they were finding out in the supermarkets they weren't selling. But because they weren't selling is because you actually think some of the fresh fish is smoked. They're that kind of this white colour, So I think the supermarkets are probably near the best at selling the Scottish fish. People will pay for quality, that's for sure.
That's where like a seafish or that organisation should be coming in pushing and
I think we always
educate in the supermarkets.
Yeah, seafish for me, we see them do a lot, in the fish and chip industry, and they do push fish and chips very well. But talking to you guys and talking to Jimmy last week, I feel like they're probably not doing a great job pushing other species. I feel like I don't think I've ever seen them, especially tell fish and chip shops to try a different species. I don't think I've ever seen it. And I think maybe, if fish and chip shops did try, because I talk about fish and chip shops because I supply them, but I think if they did try maybe once a week on a Friday, Saturday, when they have got the big footfall to say, all right, let's try something different, whether it's whiting. One of my favorite fish is fresh hake. I love fresh hake. Fresh hake for me, which is pretty amazing. I find that fresh hake is actually nothing like frozen at sea hake. I mean, it's miles apart. You almost feel like they're different species. They just don't taste right. And I know one's obviously from local waters in the UK and the other one's from like South Africa or whatever, but they're just so different. And
they're a different fish.
Oh, so they are a different.
South African hake is a different fish than the fish, the UK fish.
Oh, okay, because that makes a lot of sense to me, because the South African almost feels a firmer, a bit yellowier, maybe, whereas the British one is beautifully white. It's it's nice, and I always have that when I see it on the menu, because it's a nice product to eat, and it isn't cod or haddock. So, and I actually find that the Scottish hake, or it's somewhere the flavour is in between cod and haddock. It's, so I quite like it. Yeah, one of the
hake is probably the third one. Haddock cod. Hake has been tried a lot for sure, and it is growing. I see it in the UK now. A lot of the hake is going to the UK now, so they are trying hake, to be fair.
Yeah, it'd just be nice maybe to see a bit more ling and whiting being sold, wouldn't it? Especially because they're all sort of cod and haddock similarities, aren't they? Really, they're all quite similar, aren't they?
Do the English still eat plaice? Because there was English used to enjoy a lot of that plaice.
That's right.
I saw someone, because there's some fish and chip groups that I'm in, and I have sort of noticed some, again, anecdotal reports that maybe it's not as popular as it used to be. But I do think what I was trying to figure out is were we comparing sort of fresh or frozen unbreaded place compared to breaded place, pre-breaded place. And I think, well, if it's pre-breaded place, then I guess sales would probably drop on that, because I think maybe that's not people's favourite way of having place. I'd probably like it in batter, if I'm honest. But yeah, is that something that's still quite? Is that still quite abundant where we are in the UK?
No.
That's
another. No, it's from time to time it's seasonal again, but by goodness, you're lucky if you see about maybe 50, 60 boxes a week on Peterhead with place these days. So that's fairly dropped off a wee bit.
That was a fishery at one time.
That was, aye.
The pair scenes in summertime, the fisheries, your place in lemon soles and things.
So, one question I have, like, it all surrounds sustainability to some degree, but not just. I don't just mean MSC or MCS sustainability. I mean the whole topic of sustainability. Is it sustainable, the reliance on everyone only wanting these few species? Because I get that you can fish them sustainably and so on, but is it sustainable for the consumer's appetite to focus on those 5 species?
Well, I think cod lost its sustainability, didn't it, Alan? I think cod.
Yeah.
So I think it's haddock,
Coley,
hake and coley.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot sustainable species there, Stelios, to be honest.
I think what I mean more so is, I don't mean sustainable fish. What I mean more so is it's probably not the right word, but is it responsible that we put such a heavy reliance on those few species, even if they are fished properly? Does that make sense, what I'm sort of saying?
I think what you're trying to say, I mean, the public out there, if it's promoted sustainable fishing for sustainable caught fish, they come into our shop and they ask for that now, because a lot of people, they like that word sustainability, sustainable caught. So it is asked for, to be honest, but catching it again, Alan, I'm not too sure.
Well, if more species became commercially viable, that's merely for a fisherman point of view, it would probably take the pressure off your cod and haddock stocks, because I mean the Scottish or our fisheries class a mixed fishery. We're basically targeting cod, haddock, whiting and coley, and everything else is basically a bycatch. And it's always been that case. But if you were to say, right, okay, and then everything else is just your tusks and your place and any other bits and pieces that maybe aren't very commercially viable, if they became commercially viable, then that would take the pressure off just having to land cod and haddock and lump. So at the end of the day, we're out there to try and make a living, and you've got to balance the books at the end of a trip, and we are your kind of fuel and everything you've got to burn. So it's as it stands just now, we need that commercially viable species. But if that range of species were to increase, it would take the pressure off top 5.
Is it
if that makes sense?
Is it accurate to say that we've got over 100 species of edible fish? Well, I guess all fish is edible around the British waters.
Not so sure about 100.
Maybe a good few, I would think. Are they sure?
Yeah, no, it was just. I think it was. I think who told me that was Dr. Tom Pickerel, who was. He was at Seafish, and now he's Sustainable Fisheries Partnership, and I think he now advises people personally. I think he advises the pelagic industry at the moment, but I can find out. But I swear he said like there was so many species that we just hardly touch. And, I know even myself, like, I know it's wrong, but I love all seafood for the most part. But for some reason, the word, when someone says kippers, I don't know why. I don't even know why, because I've never had them, and I'm sure I'd probably enjoy them. But I just turn my nose up. I don't even know why, and I wonder if the general public's a bit like that when it comes to fish. Like, just before they've tried it, they're a bit like, I don't know. Like,
you didn't care what you're missing.
Alan's
delicious. I've got a box of kippers in my freezer from last summer. and my wife's freaking out. She's saying, "Get that box of kippers eaten."
And another thing, Stelios, that a lot of people don't like, which probably stops them eating fish, is they don't like the cooking smell in the house.
I agree.
After.
Yeah, I agree with that. It lingers in the air.
Yeah.
And I think, to be fair, I don't mind putting it on the barbecue. I don't mind cooking it in the house. It's one of those things. But I think another reason that if we look at consumers at home, if you get a steak, for argument's sake, which financially is probably a similar price to fish for the consumer in the supermarket, you've got a little bit of give. If you go over by 30 seconds a minute, you can get by with that. It's medium rare instead of rare or medium. But with fish, because the fillets are so much thinner and they just don't take that abuse. And if you leave it in the oven for an extra 2-3 minutes when you've got kids screaming at you from left, right, and center, it can just take your eye off the ball a little bit, and it can be very unforgiving. It's dry, and I wonder if that again, there's nothing you can do about that really, except give the people confidence to try it. And I think, but you can't re-engineer fish to make it more, I don't know, easier, let's say. But I do think salmon is one of those fish that is a lot more forgiving than most fish, I think. And I do wonder if that's why people maybe eat salmon a bit more. And it makes you wonder, because only 20 years ago, salmon was a really posh fish. Nowadays it's a lot more commercially available because of farming. But I do wonder, again, is that good? Because there's stories around that as well, isn't there, at the moment?
Well, as I say, some people would argue about the quality and the farming thing, isn't it? Just it's getting a bit of bad press just now as well. I think the damage they're kind of doing to the wild stock. You've got that parasite, is it? That goes right from the farm, it gets into farm. So no, it's the farmers need to get that good.
The Scottish farm salmon, you've got Norwegian, you've got all sorts farm salmon now. There's abundance of farm salmon.
It's almost become a bit more of a commodity, whereas I remember years ago, like, it was a special occasion if you were having salmon.
That's right.
Like, and especially salmon and big prawns. If you ever had big prawns, now it's like big prawns. Like, you can get them from Aldi for like £2, like big prawns. Like, I'm not suggesting they're great or whatever, but I mean, to the average consumer though, who just looks at that and thinks, "Oh, big prawns." I think it's quite interesting how the fish market has really focused, the fish industry, the consumers have really focused on those species. I just find it incredible.
Again, still, there's prawns and prawns. I don't know what type that Aldi has. You get the warm water, cold water.
I can't remember now. I swear I saw Peruvian on it. So what would that be? Warm water, I guess.
Warm water, yeah.
So I don't know. Would they be good or bad?
I'm not sure, but you won't beat a Scottish langoustine.
Oh, no, definitely. No, definitely. And
I noticed the Marks and Spencer's advert at Valentine's Day. They were doing their kind of Valentine's meal thing, and it was like a prawn cocktail to start with. It was Peruvian prawns, and I just about choked in my supper when I saw that. I think, Marks and Spencer, Peruvian prawns.
I can see how, like, a supermarket like Aldi at the bottom end is using Peruvian prawns, but someone at the top end like M&S, that's pretty inexcusable. Really.
The thing is, I'm not sure how it is just now, the prawns the supply market, but definitely at the tail end of last year there was an oversupply with Scottish boats because of obviously COVID, and the Italian market's been shut down and things like that. I mean, so the cold stores were stuffed with prawns. I'm sure Marks and Spencer's could have gotten a few pallets of prawns for the SFO or some Faroese that's freezing prawns.
I think another aspect of again, it falls under the umbrella. I always say that for me, the word sustainability is that it should be an umbrella term instead of just one thing about catching. But I do think that one issue that falls under sustainability to some degree is distance and miles and food miles. And you mentioned it earlier, Alan, that you said that some Norwegian or Scandinavian, let's say, boats, they would do 100 miles, 200 miles, 300 miles, and you would do 30. And surely that's going to be a big difference on the food miles as well, and how much CO2 was emitted, and so on and so on. Like, because that's also a really big deal now, isn't it?
Definitely. I mean, that's getting back to your seafish. That's the kind of things that people are concerned about, the general public, and the carbon footprint and distances that the upper food travels and food miles, and so that's something that should be exploited in the marketing side of the UK fresh fish market. It's underexploited at the moment.
Yeah, and just one more topic, and this might sort of be more Graeme's bag, actually. Well, it might be both, actually. But what are your thoughts on Morrison's buying out foul fish and their vessel and everything? Is that to you them trying to give more choice to their customers, or is it down to price?
Well, I think they've been supplying them for lots of years, I think, and I think it's probably just a feather in the cap of Morrison's to say to the public that they're not only buying, they've got their own boats now, is what they're saying. I saw in one advert, we own our own boats now. But I think it's that small Cornish boats, but I think that's a small thing they own to what the fishing industry really is. But they have got good fish in Cornwall of certain species that they've bought, the bass and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I think it's just a statement from Morrison's to say they're not only taken from processors like us, they're now going to owning the vessels. You know,
that makes sense.
I think that's where they're coming from with that one.
So you don't think there's no long-termism there? It's more marketing.
I personally think it is, but saying that, they've got a good supply of extra quality fish for their fresh fish counters from Cornwall, from that group for sure, because they are very good.
Yeah, it makes sense. That makes sense. And again, I suppose as long as they're keeping people in work and they're investing in the sort of systems and the boat and the business, then it's not a bad thing, I suppose, is it?
No.
What would you both like to see supermarkets do more of? I guess they're not going back to opening fish counters again, and I don't see a rise in opening of fishmongers. So I suppose the only thing you can see is supermarkets again. What would you like to see them do?
Well, I think it was Aldi who tried 2 or 3 companies in Peterhead to supply them with prime Scottish caught fish. But I actually had a meeting with one buyer. But the problem is that to me, supermarkets are looking for too big a margin. And that margin nowadays of whatever it may be, 30, 40, 50%, everyone's got to make a living in this job, or everyone's got to get a piece of the cake, you know? So I think given a poor price for quality fillets to put into the supermarkets, that won't work. I think people will go out of business if they do that. So I think they've got to pay for the quality of the fish that's been landed. The other thought I had was, you said fish shops and fish merchants. Mm-hmm. You could actually, like a Tesco, you could have a probably, they're not the best at it with their staff. If you had quality staff from the industry in Tesco in a stand, I think something could be done there in years to come. Having a fish. A small fish shop within a shop, if you know what I mean.
Like a rental unit. They could sublet you a little place.
Yeah,
I think that's not a bad idea, but again, there's no incentive for them unless they're supplying it. And I guess for them, it's the incentive is always to make money, isn't it? And I think one of the things I did wonder when you just mentioned that they're trying to get too much margin out of the product. Could that be down to, again, is it a full circle? Is it because there might be a lot of wastage because the shelf life is short and it didn't get eaten? It's such a tough one. What's going to be the thing that sparks that progress?
Mm-hmm. But in the northeast of Scotland, from Aberdeen, Peterhead, I think there's an opening there for someone to supply all the supermarkets in the area with the northeast Scottish fish. That would work because you will get 6-7 days shelf life on that quality fish that's been landed. But the problem is taking them from other countries. That's where the problems start. I mean, I know for a fact that one supermarket was throwing out 2 pallets of packed fish each week.
Wow.
Because they couldn't sell them. So.
Wow. That's pretty amazing.
But that's where your sea fish comes in again, I suppose.
I think you guys obviously pay a levy to sea fish. Like, what would you like to see them do? Like, if you could choose one thing, and let's assume someone from Sea Fish was listening, but no guarantees. What is the one thing that you wish they did with that levy money?
To me, promote other species of Scottish fish to the UK. That's what I wish them to do.
To be more media savvy, who get more adverts on the other media platforms.
Time, media.
You have to search a one way to see a sea fish advert.
That's a fair point. Yeah, I think you're right. You do have to go, you do have to go far and wide to see a sea fish advert. Although I do know that they have been doing some more social media work lately on Facebook, and, with promoting fish and chips. But again, that's only that's a given for you guys. If you're selling cod and haddock, that's a given for you guys. Really, like you say, you want those more obscure species to be spoken about, and And I guess that's probably Sea Fish tapping up those TV chefs and saying, look, talk more about this. So, do you remember a few years ago when Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall did the mackerel campaign? That sort of jumped a huge amount just for British mackerel, which was, I guess, made the pelagic boat owners very happy. But, you can imagine, was mackerel a really big deal before that? Probably not.
Well, I think I do remember it slightly, but as I said before, I mean, these guys, the audiences that they've got now in the Saturday cook programs and that, if Sea Fish linked up with some of them or whatever, promote to me Coley first, Ling one week, Coley the next, or whatever. We're not looking at these species in the UK. We're just sending them in a box direct to the continent. So there's something I'm sure can be done there.
So, go on. Sorry,
just like during the lockdown last year, the main months April, May, June, July kind of time, there was an upsurgence in. It was mainly within shellfish. It was mainly what we call the prawn fleet here in Scotland. We're starting to sell from ship to door kind of things. So they were missing out, like Graeme, and they were kind of selling their product to the housewife just directly, just purely. I think it was just to make ends meet. Also, it was just. But then everybody was locked down. Everybody had time to experiment at home and cook and things like that at home. But there was obviously a market there for that style of fish or that kind of style of supply. Which nobody had tapped into, nobody had really looked at her. And the majority of the advertising was just through Facebook and that kind of channel. So I was kind of surprised. I mean, obviously, some of the stories you hear of the fillet are a bit suspect. But anyway, and it's probably what Graeme wants to hear. But to me, that would show that there is local here in the northeast, but I think it was happening down in Cornwall as well. Kind of fishermen were kind of taking things into their own hand and selling direct to the consumer. So there is obviously a market there for that type of supply. So it doesn't all kind of just end up at the supermarket's feet. There is maybe a chance or something there to be opened up.
Maybe I don't know. Maybe it'd be nice if possible if the security was there for them to do so. Those people that used to work for the fishmongers at the supermarkets to open their own independent fishmongers. If the rent allowed it, or that they had a business plan and the banks would help them, or even a government grant, God forbid. That'd be nice to that would be nice to see a resurgence in that, wouldn't it? Really.
Yeah.
It was almost like going back to kind of old school kind of type of marketing, I suppose, just using a modern platform to do it, rather than word of mouth. It was word of Facebook kind of style.
Well, one question. It's quite a broad question. What is it that me or the listeners or whoever what is it that you think they need to know or understand about fishing, especially British fishing, Scottish fishing, that none of us just get? What is it, the one fundamental thing that we're missing? And it could be something that I haven't mentioned in this, or it could just be to reiterate a point.
Fishing, Alan?
Fishing, it's just the waters surrounding Scotland are some of the cleanest and the most what's the word I'm looking for productivity of fishing, for fish, are some of the most productive in the world. And it's like the fish is the healthiest, or one of the healthiest things you can eat. There's no fat in a fish. It's full of protein, full of goodness. It's very unusual unless you're taking something from Thailand or Vietnam, it's very unusual to see fish with any additives in it. So it's a totally natural product that you're getting. And from that point of view, it's to me, it should be a no-brainer to be on your housewife's shopping list every week.
And Graeme?
Yeah, I think the fishermen here in UK work very hard. I mean, the boats, this sustainable fishery, the boats, everything's hygienic, everything's to a certain standard. I think everything's caught, handled, and as Alan said, the fish is full of protein, very, very healthy. And as I go back to it again, in my opinion, Scottish fish are the best out there to buy. So I agree with Alan. It should be one of the things definitely in your shopping basket every week.
And then I agree with both of those points. And one last question. I asked Jimmy Buchan this on their last episode. What would the people before you that were either in the industry or connected to the industry, what would they be impressed about or annoyed about with today's fishing industry? Because I guess that, I don't know, have both your families been in the industry for a long time or not?
Yeah. Both, yeah.
So would you say that, what would you think that they'd either be impressed about today's industry or even shocked about?
I think my forefathers would be surprised how highly regulated it is now compared to what it was back in the kind of buccaneer days of the 60s and 70s. How controlled everything is, and how the reporting of fish now is to the kilo, and it's just so regulated now. I don't think they would enjoy that part of it, or they would find that quite frustrating compared to what it was, but it's just part of the job. And I think that's do
you think in some ways, is that good in some ways, because the barrier to entry is a little bit higher? So that means that it's less competitive in some ways?
I feel it's the way the whitefish industry is going it's almost like a mirror image of logic. It's very difficult now for any young person, any young guy to leave a school and have the foresight to be able to think he's going to get a share or a part share or own a fishing boat. I mean, unless you're part of a fishing family that's already established, I can't see how anybody, which is quite sad. It's quite depressing, and that's another thing that's got to be touched on as well, is that the lack of young local guys leaving school and coming away to fishing. I mean, in my day, it was seen as a rite of passage, but the majority of guys left the school and went fishing because that's all there was. But now there's so much things for fishing to compete with: the oil industry, the offshore, the renewables. It's almost like if you go to fishing, it's almost like it's not seen as a progressive employment kind of strategy. So it's something for the school side has got to change to encourage guys. But then it's like a double-edged sword. You're trying to encourage guys to come, but then I just said that I see it's almost impossible for somebody to see how they could own their own boat, because everything's so becoming so controlled by offices and large kind of fishing, like dominant fishing families. It's the Scottish industry is changing. it's a slow change, but it's definitely changing the whitefish towards a pelagic style model. And I think the enforcement agencies like your Marine Scotland, they would prefer to be the pelagic style model, because it's much easier for them to police the one or two big families or offices or whatever as to try and control 50 individual owners. So for enforcement or compliance point of view, it'd be easier for them. I get the impression they're kind of quite happy for the Scottish whitefish industry to be on the track it's on. But I think is a long-term thing for Scottish fishing. It's not good. Definitely.
Does that not become a bit more like the Icelandic fleets, the Norwegian fleets that are, like you say, a bit more consolidated?
It will be. It will do. Yeah, but it's easier. It's easier for the authorities to monitor and control it.
Interesting. And Graeme?
Well, I think in their younger day, I think what they'd be surprised about most is the the lack of fish markets that there is available now around the coasts. I mean, when I was 14, 15, Buckie Fish Market was full near every day, full of boats every day. White Hills, Macduff. I think nowadays, there's hardly a port, but just a landing port to put the fish to Peterhead or wherever now. So I think that would surprise them very much. There's that much people used to go to Buckie Fish Market in the morning and hang about till they know a skipper and get a fry from a skipper. It used to be a common thing, but changed days now. All that fish markets is closed. The harbours are empty. What they would probably the amount of work it goes into processing now, they would be surprised with the amount of work it goes into processing the facilities now. The standard of the facilities compared to back then. You used to go and cut fish on wooden benches. Everything's changed. It's all hygienic, for the better, of course. Saying that, there's no one got ill before, but all hygienic. The amount of paperwork nowadays, the amount of work goes into processing to get a fish on a plate now, that would surprise them very much these days. That's for sure.
Really interesting. Really interesting. And is there anything that we should have discussed that I totally forgot about, guys?
Not really. I think we've covered most stuff. A good session. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, we have quite a few more of these sessions with Scottish fishermen, and so hopefully, if there's anything we've missed, and obviously go back and listen to Jimmy Buckens, and I think hopefully we can pick it up with others as well. But I think I've just wanted to sort of delve into the Scottish seafood scene for a little while, to be honest, because we just haven't really touched on it. So I wanted to spread the love a little bit,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good.
The only thing I would say that we might add is seasonality. Not just sustainability, but seasonality of stocks. When fish are at a prime, that's something that sea fish should maybe be looking into as well. If they are going to be like promoting fish, it's pointless promoting a haddock in April when they're all skinny and they taste good. There's no flesh in there. There's no yield. So the seasonality would be one of the main things to kind of key into that promotion strategy.
Yeah.
Are you aware of that, Stelios, the spawning season for haddock? Yeah.
I don't know the exact date, but I do know that when they do spawn, they're not very nice. They're a bit sort of not rubbery, bit wet almost. Yeah. But I'm not full on. It's been a while since I've bought fresh fish, to be honest, because I don't work in the fish and chip shop no more. So, but yeah, no, it is. It would be ideal if those that did use, even if they use fresh fish, rather than saying, "Oh, well, you know what, haddock's no good at the moment. That's why it's like that." Move on to something else, and and I think, because I do know people that use fresh fish, and they will get complaints at that time of the year, and they'll say to customers, "Oh, they're spawning," and I think, well, now they're doing a disservice to their customer and to their business and to seafood as well, because they're selling an inferior product and they know about it, and it wasn't out of malice, obviously, but I think it's the fear of not wanting to try a different species. So I don't think they're doing it on purpose. It's just they're afraid.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I just want to say thank you for your time. And
That's okay.
Oh, go on. Sorry, Alan.
Okay.
Yep. And
I'm saying it's just like that's what you see. I mean, you'll hear people at this time of year. Oh, I had a haddock supper from the chip shop, and it was just rubbish. Oh, I wouldn't have tried a haddock just now because this isn't the time of year to eat a haddock. So if you wouldn't expect it to be juicier at this time of year unless it was a rock up haddock. That's good.
So Alan, if we zone into that, let's say they're not doing it out of malice, they're doing it because they're uneducated about it, and it's not their fault. They just don't know. So, what would you say they should jump onto when haddock is spawning? Let's say what other options are there?
Well, you could say hake. I mean, you're speaking hake. What point of try hake?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Hake or whiting.
And that's a good point. So, if that information was relayed to the chip shops, they could just say, look, we love doing fresh fish. We don't want to jump onto frozen at sea. But at the moment, haddock is spawning. It's a bit wet. Try this. Yeah, that'd be great, wouldn't it? But I do think the problem is it's just this over reliance on cod and haddock. And I think, and I don't know the answers, and we know the reasons, but we don't know that how to fix it. And but I think it does it poses a few challenges to someone like Seafish, whose job it is to actually start on that. I think.
Yeah, I think Seafish need to come and speak to fishermen. I think that would be a good place to start.
Do you not hear from them much? Then I take it.
No.
How about you, Graeme? Do you hear more of them or not really?
No, not really at all.
That's pretty depressing, isn't it? Like, I'm not taking the piss, but like that's really like, I'm not being funny. Like, they're the organisation that we're all talking about here, that we all sort of look towards, and yet they don't really get in touch with fishermen.
You only see emails and some. It's mainly emails. You see this, that, and the next thing, but never sit down and discuss how things should be done. So maybe that's something they will do, though.
Yeah, let's hope so. I'll send this on to a few of my contacts at Seafish, and let's see if they send it on to the right people in Seafish. You never know. All right, guys. Well, thank you for your time, and I hope you have a lovely evening. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Stels. Thank you.